friends. This is Steve Dupuie for the Bible News Prophecy Program with Dr. Bob Thiel. Dr. Thiel, the U.S. is facing many problems, two of which are the economy and our relationship with Russia. Please discuss these two issues with us today.
Well, starting with the economy, I saw a headline yesterday. The United States drops out of global competitiveness top 10 for the first time ever. And basically it says, because of lack of social cohesion, adaptability, and agility, the United States, along with its polarized political landscape and slow-moving legislative process, is dropping out. Now, the U.S. held the top #1 position from 1997 to 2009. It dropped to number 30 in 2017, but in 2024, it's out of the top 10. The top 6 economies in 2024, by the way, according to the survey, are in Europe.
Has this had a negative impact on the U.S. population?
Yes, it's political polarization, lack of social cohesion, it's debt, sanctions, bullying policies have pushed other nations to take protective actions, and it's pushing for immorality, is also setting out for its downfall.
How so?
In late 2012, U.S. President Barack Obama was getting along well with Russia. But then Hillary Clinton, and I've got this from her book, Hard Choices, when she was Secretary of State, she went to Russia and she pushed the LGBTQ agenda. Her counterpart over there, she said, who was normally nice, turned nasty and basically said, we allow homosexuality, but we will not promote it. We can't do this stuff. Don't bother us with our internal affairs. Well, from then on, the relationship with Russia went downhill. Now, Hillary Clinton bragged about her use of soft power. But a lot of countries have considered that to be bullying. And the bullying by the U.S., by Hillary Clinton to persuade Russia, didn't do so. So that didn't work. The United States did other steps against Russia.
In hindsight, perhaps a better title for Mrs. Clinton's book would have been Bad Decisions rather than Hard Choices. How did Russia respond to the steps taken by the U.S.?
Saw another headline yesterday. Putin's master plan for the collapse of America. In a startling move, Russia's President Putin has been quietly steering away from the global liberal order for years, foreseeing a looming catastrophe. Russian economist Sergey revealed how Putin's strategy, starting with the formation of the Eurasian European Union in 2014, aims to create a new power center to rival the United States. He warns of the economic collapse imminent to the United States due to its unsustainable financial practices. Now, I said the United States is doing some stuff to Russia. Well, that article didn't mention that the U.S. supported a coup against the pro-Russian Ukrainian president in 2013 and 2014. Here's something from the Washington Post. Since 2015, the CIA spent millions of dollars to transform Ukraine's Soviet foreign services into potent allies against Moscow. CIA-Ukraine collaboration took root in the aftermath of the 2014 political protests that prompted Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, to flee the country, which was followed by Russia's annexation of Crimea. Now, despite the claims about supporting democracy, the United States supported the coup against Ukraine's democratically elected president. Now, the Wall Street Journal and New York Times had some things about this. It said that what happened between Russia and Ukraine in 2022 was actually provoked. The Times wrote, towards the end of 2021, according to a European official, Putin was weighing whether to launch his full-scale invasion, and he met with one of the heads of Russia's main spy services, who told him that the CIA, together with Britain's MI6, were controlling Ukraine and turning it into a beachhead for operations against Moscow. Wall Street Journal said, this report demonstrates that this Russian intelligence assessment was absolutely true. For more than a decade, dating back to 2014, the CIA was building up, training, and arming Ukrainian intelligence and paramilitary forces who were engaging in assassinations and other provocations against pro-Russian forces in eastern Ukraine, against Russian forces in Crimea, and across into the border of Russia itself.
Wow. That the USA was involved in staging a coup in Ukraine is a stunning revelation. Was there more to the article?
Oh yeah, the New York Times said that the partnership deepened in 2016, but Ukrainians wanted to do even more. And they started doing more assassinations on their own Russian. And the United States government said, don't do it, or we'll cut off support. But the United States didn't cut off support, according to the Times article. Said, in other words, Ukrainian paramilitary forces were armed, funded, and led by the United States. And that the so-called maiden coup rebellion of February 2014 happened when right-wing and neo-Nazi forces backed by the United States overthrew the elected pro-Russian president and installed a pro-imperialistic regime there. That's what Wall Street Journal was talking about, what the New York Times said. You know, the United States was not simply peaceably watching this situation. As far as Crimea goes, you know, they had an election there, and Crimeans voted to be annexed by Russia. Mm-hmm. The U.S. said, oh, that was an invalid election. Well, I was in Germany, actually. I was talking to an agent from Lufthansa, the airline. She had an accent. I asked her where she was from. She said, Crimea. They said, well, what do you think about this annexation by Russia? Oh, it's great. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're being told in the West, oh, no, these people didn't want it. And she was all for it. And you know, the United States took all kinds of actions against Russia, and this ended up with Russia starting its special military operation into Ukraine. Now, I'm not trying to justify any military actions, but I thought providing background explains what's been happening and some of the reasons why.
Does this background information help explain America's lack of global competitiveness?
To a degree, yes, because as far as what sanctions go, the United States keeps putting more and more sanctions against Russia. So much so that the state Duma, which is like their Congress, over Russia said the dollar has become toxic. Washington has totally undermined trust in the dollar as a global reserve currency by imposing illegal sanctions against our country's financial institutions. It has been discredited, he claims, and that the BRICS members are looking for alternatives to dollars because they don't want to become hostages to U.S. policies. And because of this, Russia is now doing more and more trade with its own currency and with other currencies, and pretty much without the United States dollar. Now, I've been warning for many years it would be a cost to U.S. sanctions, and this has been going on. And because of this, Russia started to take steps back in 2014 to separate itself from the West. And again, I mentioned the Eurasian Union, and Russian economists said that the government of the United States will one day declare default, not pay its debts back. And he says this will result in a 30% collapse of the GDP of the United States and consumption of half of the stuff for the households. And according to him, the United States' reckless and irresponsible monetary policies are leading to that, and the sanctions are part of it, and other nations are seeing this. But then he said, Russia is the only country on the planet that's ready to offer the whole world an alternative development model. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly warned that a global catastrophe will soon occur, which will begin with the financial collapse in the United States.
For those of us in the United States, that type of catastrophe is almost inconceivable. Does the Bible verify that catastrophe?
Yes, in the 600 BCs, God had the prophet Habakkuk write a short book. In chapter 2, he talked about something for the appointed time of the end. And starting in verse 6, he says, woe to him who increases what is not his. How long? And to him who loads himself with many pledges. Will not your creditors rise up suddenly? Will not they awake who oppress you? And you will become their booty. Because you plundered many nations, all the remnant peoples will plunder you. Because of men's blood and the violence of the land and the city, and those who dwell in it. Now, the United States has an admitted official debt of over $34.7 trillion, and it plans on increasing that. And it's going to cause a collapse, and the Russians see this. And going back to the Russian report, it's precisely in order to minimize the cost of the coming catastrophe their economists said, that Putin began preparing Russia for it long ago. An important step of this direction was taken in 2021. It was then that de-dollarization campaign in the Russian Federation received a powerful impetus. The country began to actively get rid of this currency for gold and other foreign currency reserves.
Will trading dollars for gold prove to be a good move for Mr. Putin?
Yes. In the 11th chapter of the book of Daniel and the 18th chapter of the book of Revelation, we see that gold will have value after the United States is gone. And going back to this other article, it says Russia has already completely gotten rid of the dollar. And when the economy of the United States begins to collapse under the weight of its accumulated problems and contradictions, when the entire global dollar system collapses, Russia will be safe, because by this time our country will be completely freed from all its obligations associated with being a controlled state. The United States, it's done.
Okay. Does this economist mention the role of the BRICS alliance?
That particular article, he did not. But as far as the BRICS alliance, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and now a bunch of other countries have joined it, okay. It was actually partially formed, according to the president of Brazil, in order to bypass the US dollar. And the reality is one day the US dollar is going to be toppled. But let me add that the Bible teaches that a coming European power will also accumulate gold. So that's the way that we're seeing it in the world.
Well, wouldn't the petrodollar offer some backup protection for the US dollar?
It has been. I mean, since the US went off the gold standard, there was an unofficial agreement with Saudi Arabia along those lines. But the reality is Saudi Arabia has been starting to sell oil in something other than dollars. And there's an article about it this week that said Saudi Arabia is progressively reducing its dependence on the United States. It joined the BRICS group, and it's been increasing its diplomatic and economic ties with China, Iran, and other nations considered to be U.S. foreign policy enemies. And the fact is, for a long time, the dollar was worth something because you had to pay for oil in it. Right. Now, Russia's not trading its oil in dollars, nor is Iran. And other nations in BRICS are avoiding dollars. Plus, we see changes in Saudi Arabia. So yes, changes the U.S. pushed or led economic system is collapsing.
So is the collapse of the U.S. financial system solely due to the acts of the BRICS alliance and changes in the status of the petrodollar?
No, the U.S. Use of bullying with its political influence, debt accumulation is also part of all this. But there's one other reason. This is a reason that a lot of people don't want to pay attention to in the United States. But I want to read something from the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 30, starting in verse 12. Therefore, thus says the Holy One of Israel, because you despise this word and trust in oppression and perversity and rely on them, therefore this iniquity shall be to you like a breach ready to fall in a bulge in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly and in an instant. So that kind of sounds like the prophecy of Habakkuk. It's the United States trusting in perversity that looks to have been a trigger the last 12 plus years, the United States taking steps against Russia. And the United States has also greatly increased its debt since then. It's more than doubled since Hillary Clinton attempted to push perversity on Russia. You know, the collapse of the United States is coming. Vladimir Putin sees the proverbial handwriting on the wall, and he's taking steps. Hopefully, our audience sees it. Hopefully, they'll take the proper steps.
Thank you, Dr. Thiel. For more interviews with Dr. Thiel, in addition to written as well as audio articles, visit our website at BibleNewsProphecy.net. This is Steve Dupuie for the Bible News Prophecy Program.